This is the final video in the planning process series. There have been two before this, so hopefully you'll have a chance to look over those before attempting to look at this one. However, this video is partially a summary and reiteration of the previous videos, in addition to some new content which is inserted in to fill out blanks from the past. So let's look at, first of all, strategy and the e-business. Now, we haven't talked about e-business before in this series on the planning process, so let's have a few words about it. The internet is the new commercial frontier. Its logic still applies, but commercial logic still applies, I should say, and that of course is that the balance sheet rules. The balance sheet is still primal in business consideration. Even though we're dealing with very advanced technologies and emerging technologies and new niches, the balance sheet still plays a part. So e-business itself, well, in the early days there was a tendency to overestimate the commercial power and scope of the internet. There was a mad rush in the early days to buy into stock associated with the internet, and eventually that came to an end with the so-called dot-com collapse. E-business, because it was new, I think many people assumed it was going to be a great new future, a great new opening for business. But it certainly is, and some of the biggest companies in the world are e-business, but we still need tactile products, we still need houses and food, and there's still a market for all the things that we wanted before. It hasn't to any great extent replaced a lot of the day-to-day products that we come across. With experience and, I suppose, acculturation, getting used to the process, coupled with better technologies, its long-term impact will be considerable. There is no doubt the development of networks, communications networks, and the way that databases, for example in logistics, can be integrated, and the amount of information flowing back to the consumer, all of this is to the advantage and the openness of the system, and those developments in themselves ensure the survival and a place for e-business in our business lives. There are some lessons, however, from the dot-com period when everyone was madly buying into dot-com stock. First of all, the internet is constantly evolving. There isn't a fix. There doesn't appear to be, at least. The products that we think of as stable and reliable have developed almost out of all recognition over the last few years. Early versions of operating systems, for example the Microsoft operating system, is nothing like the operating system that's sold by Microsoft at the moment. The one today is far superior, and the same applies in many areas. So the technology is not constant, it's evolving. There's no one-size-fits-all internet strategy. It depends crucially on the product, it depends on the market, it depends on lots of factors. So one generic solution has never totally emerged. One solution, one business solution that applies to everybody in all space and time. That doesn't work. It's a new commercial frontier, and thus it's open to entrepreneurial scope. We think of entrepreneurs nowadays in terms almost of the internet. We think of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and all the big names, Larry Page and so on. So we think of entrepreneurship almost in the context of this. Perhaps that's not fair to more traditional business, where people running department stores or running fashion houses or whatever don't seem to get the same limelight as the entrepreneurs from the electronic side of the business. The internet tools and techniques to build customer loyalty are constantly emerging. There's far greater feedback and contact now with consumers. Consumers are able to track their product when it's shipped. They know exactly where it is in the world. There's far greater information available. Companies can be checked online, and stocks can be checked, and you can order directly online. And there's the advent of even e-tailing, probably pioneered by people like eBay and Amazon. But these are models which are spreading out, and there are many more sites available. And these have been around for a long time now. In internet terms, they've been around for ages. So who knows what the future will hold in this context. Let's go back to strategic planning process. Now, some of this material, as I said at the outset, we will have covered or touched on in the other videos, but let's take a run ahead again. First of all, the 4 steps in the strategic management process is to formulate the grand strategy. This is a long-term process involving senior management, so they must have a grand strategy looking into the future. And from the strategy, they must formulate plans, because the strategy will do nothing unless there is a plan to implement it. And then the strategic plans are implemented. These are the ones that come down to the next level, to the intermediate level. And it's also necessary for the management to ensure strategic control, that the plans, the implementation of the plans, I should say, these are controlled. Monitoring and corrective action is needed at all times, and feedback must be taken into account. Feedback must be sought, and action taken based on the feedback. It's a continuous process, so that the entire strategic plan can be updated and refined. The formulation of this grand strategy, well, first of all, a general explanation of how the organization mission is to be accomplished. Well, we can imagine it as the grand strategy as the grand mission. What is it that the business is attempting to do in very general, very ground terms? Then we have the situation analysis, finding the organization's niche by performing a SWOT, perhaps, a strength, weakness, opportunities and threats analysis, to synchronize new opportunities with available resources. So it's not just having this ground vision, but it's having realism as well, injected into the process through a SWOT analysis. What are the strengths of the organisation? What are the weaknesses? What opportunities are really there? Not ones imagined or desired. What's really out there? And be realistic. Are there other players out there? Are there other businesses competing for the market? Have they got history in the market? Have they got reputation? Have they established themselves? So it's a situational analysis is almost a wake-up call. And a capability profile, well, it's a bit like the situation analysis. It's identifying the strengths and weaknesses. It's narrowing down everything to say, this is the organization's ability to do something, and here are the weaknesses associated with this. This is where we're vulnerable. And the grand strategy emerges out of an assessment of these profiles. First of all, situational analysis. Well, it's the key capabilities for successful companies. It's looking at these key capabilities in terms of different factors. For example, the quick response to the market trends. How quick can the company respond to market trends? Depends on the nature of the business, the nature of the product, of course, the nature of the market. But generally speaking, some markets, trends can emerge very, very rapidly, and it's the ability of the business to respond to that trend and to develop a product line that matches the trend and capitalizes on what's happening. It's how fast the business can develop products. Again, it depends on the nature of the business. If it's a very specialist engineering business, it may not be able to overnight develop a new product. If it's something based in the consumer end of the market, it might be able to. It's this idea of synergy again. It's joining the existing bits together, perhaps rapidly, to enable a new product to be developed. Perhaps all the ingredients are in place, it's just necessary to put them together. In that case, a quick response could be anticipated. Having got the product together, how quick or how quickly can the business tool up and make the product and deliver it? The customers don't want promises of what's going to happen, they want the product. They're not sympathetic necessarily to the company's plight and the problems they have in developing the product or making the product or whatever. They're interested in the product itself, seeing it, using it. And the company needs to not just throw itself at everything that's coming along. The looking at the capabilities of successful companies. Successful companies are ones that can control costs and continuously monitor costs and know what technologies are out there and what's affordable, and have an investment, a capital budget and an investment plan that enables them to bring down costs, perhaps year on year, and enables them to compete successfully in other markets. And there's also some sort of commitment to continuous improvement. It's not just upgrading the capital. Perhaps the workers need to be upgraded. More training, more experience, wider experience, looking at different facets of the business and developing more technical skills. Perhaps that's what's required. So the continuous improvement is in people as well as the processes and the product. And almost above all, the operation must have flexibility. It must not be fixed on one product and one way of making it. That was probably acceptable 100 years ago when technology was not changing and when there was a limited number of goods on the market, and for the producer it was as if life was easier. Now, in a globalized market with competitors ready to spring up from in all directions, it's necessary to have flexibility to enable a response to that problem. Now, the criteria for formulating the strategic plan. Well, develop clear objectives and state them in measurable terms. This was dealt with in a previous video, but it's important to be able to measure how successful you are. The business needs to know how to measure success. There's no point in saying that we are successful or the business is successful if you can't measure it. So measurable criteria is important. It's also a good idea to identify the resources and the processes that are required to accomplish the objective. It's a very good idea because without these nothing will happen. But identifying the correct resources and identifying the correct technologies and processes, they may be slightly trickier. Generally speaking, for a lot of products on the market, there may be alternative ways of producing it, and it's the selection of the most appropriate technology that's going to lead to the most efficient method of production and probably the better experience the consumer will have in terms of delivery, and the more profitable the line will be. This should really assign responsibilities to appropriate personnel. Having the right people to do the right jobs is essential. And depending on the size of the business, these could be quite specialized personnel. Bigger businesses have highly specialized personnel. Smaller businesses, the manager tends to be more generic, doing a little of everything. Next, estimate the times to accomplish the activities and their appropriate sequencing. In a strategic plan, it's necessary to estimate what sort of time scale. First start, what's the planning horizon? When will this start and end? What time period does the strategic plan cover? And then look at the different activities and try to assign timescales to those. And determine the right sequence. Make sure the priorities are in place, that each function follows appropriately from the previous one. If they're out of sequence, there will be bottlenecks in the production system, there will be hold-ups, there will be confusion, there will be frustration and irritation. So getting the proper sequencing is essential. And communicate and coordinate the above elements and complete the action plan. Communication is essential. The people who deliver this, the line managers, the departmental heads and so on, these people must buy into the plan. They must see it and identify with it and agree with it in a natural way. It must feel right. It must be the right plan, and it must be understood by all of them. If that happens, the chances are it will be a success. And develop a clear project management schedule. This is part of the sequencing I talked about earlier and the determination of the priorities. But set it out. Set out the timescales, and just imagine you're fitting it together in some sort of project management design, because that's really what it is. Now, in terms of implementation, the strategy must have a purpose, obviously. It must be orientated towards the efficient achievement of objectives of the business. I mean, to say anything other than that would be silly. To say anything other would be wrong. If you said it was orientated towards the inefficient achievement of objectives of the business, that doesn't sound right at all. So the strategy is straightforward. The strategy is to create an efficient business and to set out objectives that will lead to efficiency in the business. It must be feasible. It must be doable. It can't be aspirational. It can't be just fantasy. This must be practical and doable. It must be feasible. It's got to be capable of being implemented and monitored and updated and changed as the markets change, as society changes, as requirements change. It must be flexible. It must be flexible, it must be feasible, it must be doable, it must be implemented, and it must be monitored. The planning process must involve filtering down. It must enable It must be drawn in a way that enables it to be communicated at all levels within the business, so that everyone knows what the idea is and where the business is going. And it's not giving too much away to the competitors or being worried about the competitors finding out what the strategy is. This is in very general terms. If you look back on the material on the mission, it's very, very general, but nonetheless, all the personnel within the business can read it and can identify with it, can perhaps agree with it, and commit to it. So the plan itself is understood from the top to the bottom, and from the bottom to the top. Everyone understands it. The top level must be used to translate the strategic plan into lower plans. So the top level plan is the grand vision, the grand design. And this must be moved into more operational type plans, which means it can be delivered in terms of the departmental objectives further down. It meets the resource requirements. It has the machinery and the personnel. It has the facility to deliver. If you like, the individual plans are the separate bits, the separate components that go to make up the top level plan. So to do it all, the organizational structure has to be right. It's a top level plan, and then the organizational structure must be such that when the plan is broken into the smaller segments that are going to go to the operational end, the organizational structure is suitable for them to accept those plans, work on them and deliver them, so that the overall plan is being delivered. And the people who receive them, as I said earlier, understand what they're doing. They understand how it fits together and what their function is and how important they are in terms of the overall management and delivery of the strategic plan. I say management, they're managing their individual micro parts, their individual operational parts. They're managing it efficiently and delivering it up to meet the overall strategic plan. And the culture of the business, of course, must be such that it's what they want. It's what people want. They relate to it. They identify with it. They agree with it. It's the culture. And the personnel are motivated. They believe in this. And this gives them satisfaction in their work. They are doing something in a corporate sense that is measurable, and they can see the output at the end, and they can be proud of what they're doing. And of course there are control systems. There are systems which look at the whole running of the strategic plan. There are committees and personnel whose job it is to monitor and feedback information and deal with issues and update the plan, and we've met diagrams earlier in these notes that show how this is linked. So you have this feedback mechanism, you have the plan going forward, you have a problem, the problem is fixed, there's a feedback from it, it's fed back into the plan is amended, and a new plan emerges, and it doesn't have to be a radically different plan, it just updated some aspects of the original one. So the control systems are in play all the time. Now, strategic control, well, a formal control system is needed to keep the strategic plans on track. It is necessary to have a formal one and to set up test channels for information. A lot of the issues in the delivery of strategic plans is related to information. Information about the technology, the product, the design, the personnel, the weaknesses in the system, cost saving potential, whatever it is. these have to be communicated. This is sources of information, and there must be some sort of mechanism to pick it up and deal with it. A monitoring system is required to oversee the plan's progress, review problems, and assess the fit of the strategic assumptions to the environment. In other words, is the plan assuming something that's not there? Is the plan assuming that there will be high levels of economic growth in the economy in the next 10 years, when perhaps economists and politicians are predicting slow growth in the economy? So the level of growth might be one issue. It's not a realistic assumption, perhaps. Maybe economists are predicting inflation, or predicting a banking crisis, or predicting some issue in the environment, the economic environment, or the political environment, which will impact on the strategic plan of the business. And perhaps the business is completely ignoring this. So, to what extent are the assumptions of the plan matched with the realities of the environment and the likely reality of the environment, given what people are saying about it? Suggested earlier that this could be done in a project management way, and there are programs available to do this. Microsoft Project, for example. There are other ones out there as well. But some of the bigger and more sophisticated programs, such as Microsoft Project, are good tools for reasonable sized businesses to deploy in enabling them to get a picture of the overall strategic plan, the departmental plans, the product plans, the resource plans, and so on, and integrate all of those into one single vision. That might be one way of doing it. Corrective action based on evaluation and feedback. Well, negative feedback should always prompt corrective action. And ideally, there should be some way of trying to anticipate the negative feedback, anticipate what's going wrong, and deal with it before it happens. Stop it from happening. This means being critical and having a very detailed monitoring process. But if it's dealt with before it happens, that's to the credit of the business. If it happens, then it's firefighting. It's trying to explain what happened, why it went wrong, perhaps apologize, perhaps compensate. Negative feedback is something that is to be avoided. Possible corrective actions include updating the strategic assumptions. In terms of a plan, if it's a negative feedback, then perhaps the assumptions of the plan were wrong. So instead of bullying through the existing set of assumptions, perhaps management should look more carefully at what has been said and see if there is some way in which the assumptions can be amended to accommodate the criticism and to deal with that. You could reformulate the strategic plans. That's a way of looking at it. Reformulating the strategic plans means, based on the feedback, making tinkering with the plans in a way that enables them to meet the criticisms. So corrective action is taken almost immediately. It may need rewriting the policies. It may need something more profound. rewriting the policies and the assumptions of the plan, rewriting the plan if the feedback is particularly bad or gaping holes have been found in the proposal. Sometimes people don't fit with what's been required in terms of skills or competencies. Tragically, with the advent of technology, not everyone updated, not everybody kept up with what's required, and this has meant that there are skills gaps in the economy, and companies sometimes experience these. They can partially address them by on-the-job training or requesting courses at local institutions, educational institutions, or that sort of thing, but sometimes it just simply means changing the personnel, tragically, but that seems to be an outcome of the changing technology and changing way in which work is being done. Finally, the budgets themselves may be modified and the allocations changed in light of feedback so that priorities are realigned. Identifying a particular process as high priority, that means that resources should be there to ensure it happens. If something is low priority, perhaps it's more of the nature of we would like to have it, it would be nice to do it in terms of the ABC analysis. It's not critical. Perhaps the priority would be moved down in that case and budgets altered to reflect this. So that's our look at the planning process. It's a detailed account of the whole planning process. It's coming in 3 videos in this case. Each one needs careful attention, and it might be wise to make notes of each slide and study it in detail. In the meantime, thank you for watching.